The morning my daughter left for Florence, she hugged me the way people hug a piece of furniture they're rearranging. Brief, efficient, already thinking about where they're going next. Her husband was in the driveway, loading the last of the carry-ons into the rental car. His mother sat in the back seat with a silk scarf and dark glasses pushed up her nose, not quite looking at me, not quite ignoring me either. She gave me that small wave, the kind that takes no effort and offers nothing, as the engine turned over. My daughter leaned in close and said, quick and cheerful, "Don't forget the sourdough starter needs feeding Tuesday and Thursday. And the walk-in thermostat's been running a little warm on the left side. You know where everything is." She said it like I was a new employee covering a shift. Like this wasn't the bakery her father and I had built from an empty storefront on Oak Street 38 years ago, with a second-hand mixer and a loan we spent 3 years paying off. Like I hadn't learned every crack in that floor, every temperamental burner on the deck oven, the exact angle to hold the pastry cutter so the dough didn't stick. I nodded. My hand found the porch railing and held it. Her husband gave me a 2-fingered salute from the driver's side window, already pulling out. His mother didn't look back. I stood at the end of the driveway until the car turned left at the corner, and the taillights faded behind the maple trees. A crow called once from the telephone wire, then nothing. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that asks you questions you're not ready to answer. I went inside and made coffee and sat at the small table by the front window, where my husband used to read the paper every morning. The chair still had the shape of him somehow, the slight tilt to the right. I had bought a new cushion last spring but could not bring myself to replace the chair. That evening, the family group chat lit up. My daughter had posted a photo from the airport lounge, her and her husband with their boarding passes fanned out like playing cards, grinning. His mother added a short video of the plane pushing back from the gate, some Italian phrase in the caption. Everyone responded with heart emojis and safe travels. I typed a thumbs up and set the phone face down on the counter. No one asked how the bakery was, no one wrote to me. I folded a dish towel over the rack and went to bed before dark. I was at the bakery by 4:30 the next morning, the way I always am. My husband used to say the first hour of the day belonged to the baker and nobody else. He meant it as a comfort, something to anchor you to, especially in the harder seasons. I think about it most mornings as I turn the key in the back door and feel the heat from the proofing drawers reach me before the lights even come on. I pulled on my apron, the old canvas one with the crossed rolling pins my daughter had embroidered on the chest pocket years ago when she was learning to sew and still thought handmade things were the best kind of gift, and started the sourdough. The starter was exactly as it should be, active and fragrant, the way it has been for 19 years. Around 7:30, the first regulars arrived. The retired teacher from Pine Street, who has a cinnamon roll every Tuesday without fail. The man from the hardware store who always takes the same whole wheat loaf and never quite manages to say thank you. The young mother with twins in a double stroller who orders 2 blueberry scones and eats one standing up before she even reaches the sidewalk. I knew every one of them, their orders, their schedules, the small complaints they offer along with their payment. They asked where my daughter was. Vacation, I said each time. Italy, she'll be back. They nodded the way people do when they're deciding whether to say how nice or how lucky, or simply nothing at all. By noon, I was tired in my knees, the way I used to be before she started helping full-time after her father passed. But the bread was baked. The cases were full. Everyone who came left with what they came for. I locked up at 2 and drove back to the house. That's when I found the recipe journal. I wasn't looking for it specifically. I was looking for the insurance renewal notice that I'd tucked somewhere sensible and then promptly forgotten about. The kind of errand that belongs to a quieter afternoon. I checked the desk in the back sitting room, the wooden file box on the shelf above it, the small wicker basket my husband had used for things that needed attention. The basket held 3 seed catalogs from 2 years ago and a birthday card with no envelope. The recipe journal was in the desk drawer, right where it always lived. But something was wrong. The leather cover had post-it tabs along the edges, pink and yellow, the kind my daughter uses for flagging things when she's working through documents. There must have been 40 of them. I opened to one of the flagged pages. My husband's handwriting, steady and square. His blueberry scone formula with the cold butter technique he'd developed after 3 years of adjusting, 3 years of batches that were good but not quite right, until one February morning when he got it and came home and made me taste it, standing at the kitchen counter at 10 o'clock at night, because he said it couldn't wait. In the margin in his pencil, add zest only after butter is cut in. Rest 12 minutes, no longer. Small corrections the kind only someone who cared deeply would bother to write down. The tabs went through every major recipe in that book. I turned pages slowly, my thumb following the flags. The sourdough. The croissant dough, with its temperature notes and lamination diagram drawn in pencil. Cinnamon roll recipe we'd adapted over 4 years. The version that made the teacher come back every Tuesday. Every single one flagged, annotated, carefully marked. I looked at the desk. My daughter's tablet was sitting on the corner, plugged into charge, the screen dark. She must have left it behind by accident. Or perhaps not by accident. I pressed the home button. It asked for a passcode. I tried her birthday. The screen opened. I found it in the Photos app in a shared album I had never seen. Someone had photographed every flagged page of that recipe journal, 61 images. Clear, close, bright enough to read every pencil annotation, every correction, every small mark my husband had made across 38 years of mornings. The most recent image had been sent by email. The notification was still on the screen. The recipient was an address I didn't recognize at a company I did. Hartley Group, Inc. The subject line read, Brand Asset Documentation, Hadley's. Brand Asset. My husband's handwriting. His corrections in pencil. 19 years of the sourdough starter we'd kept alive through power outages and 2 kitchen renovations and the long year when he was sick, and I ran the bakery alone and talked to it sometimes just to have something to talk to. All of it reduced to brand asset documentation in an email my daughter had sent without a word to me. I set the tablet back exactly as I'd found it. I pressed the button so the screen went dark. Then I stood with my hands at my sides and did not move for a long time. I kept the journal with me the rest of that week. I carried it to the bakery in my bag every morning and brought it home every night. It didn't leave my sight. I told myself there was an explanation. There is always a version of yourself that wants to believe in the explanation. My daughter had her reasons. She was documenting things for the website, or for the business plan she'd mentioned last year, or for something that would make complete sense when she explained it calmly over the phone. I didn't call her. I went to the bakery each morning. I baked and smiled at the regulars and swept the flour off the floor at closing. I fed the sourdough starter on Tuesday and Thursday, as instructed, though the instruction had not been necessary. On Thursday afternoon, my neighbor Phyllis stopped in for her usual slice of lemon pound cake and coffee. We have been neighbors for 22 years. She knew my husband. She had brought food to the house every week for a month after his funeral and kept doing it quietly, without making it seem like a thing that needed to be acknowledged. We were standing at the counter while she told me about her sister's hip surgery, and I was half listening, half watching the street through the front window, when she said, in the same easy breath, "Oh, I ran into your daughter at the market a couple weeks back." She mentioned the bakery might be going through some exciting changes. Something about growing the brand. My hand stopped on the counter. "Growing the brand," I said. "That's what she said. Her husband's been working with some group out of Portland, I think. She seemed very excited about it." Phyllis looked at me over her coffee cup. "Is it something you're ready to share yet?" I looked at the lemon pound cake. "Not yet," I said. After she left, I stood behind the counter for a long time, looking at the old photograph above the espresso machine. My husband and me on the morning we opened, 1987. Flour on his chin. Me laughing at something he'd just said. I no longer remembered what it was, and there was no one left to ask. That evening, I sat down with the bakery's business account and went through 6 months of transactions. My husband had handled the finances until the last year when he couldn't. After he passed, my daughter stepped in, and I had been grateful. She was organized, careful with numbers, and in those first months I hadn't had the heart for spreadsheets. There was so much to carry without adding columns of figures to it. I should have looked sooner. There were 3 charges I didn't recognize, each from the same billing entity, Hartwell Consulting LLC. The first was $1,400 in March, the second, $1,800 in April, the third, $1,000 at the beginning of this month. $4,200 total, billed to the bakery account as professional services rendered. I wrote the amounts in my husband's old ledger, the paper one he had kept for decades before everything went digital, the one I'd taken out only once since the funeral to record the payment for his memorial flowers. I added the new entries beneath it in my own handwriting, the date, the amounts, a note not authorized. Then I went through the file of documents I'd signed in the past year. Third folder from the front. A document from the end of March. My daughter had brought it to Sunday dinner in a thin folder, set it beside my plate with the dessert dishes, and explained that the state required updated LLC filings every few years. Routine, she said, standard. I had signed it over peach cobbler and not thought about it again. I read it now, all 4 pages, standing at the back desk of the bakery at 9 in the evening. It was not a routine LLC filing. It was a limited partnership amendment. It named Hartwell Consulting LLC as a limited partner, with a 49% operational stake in Hadley's Bakehouse, including the right to negotiate and execute contracts on behalf of the partnership in matters pertaining to brand licensing, franchise development, and business acquisition. My husband had painted the letters on our sign himself that first summer, careful and patient, because he could not afford a sign company. 38 years later, I had signed away the right to sell what he painted without knowing that was what I was doing. I put the document back in the folder, closed the drawer, walked to the sink and washed my hands slowly with the dish soap that smells like orange peel. Then I went back to the computer and removed my son-in-law from every connected account. The system asked me to confirm the changes 3 separate times, as if it wanted to be sure. I clicked through each one. Then I went outside and sat on the back step in the dark with a glass of water and listened to the neighborhood quiet down around me. Someone's television through an open window 2 houses over. A car passing across street, an owl somewhere in the direction of the park. I sat there until the glass was empty, then went inside to bed. At 7 the next morning, my phone rang. I was at the oven watching the first batch of morning rolls, and I knew the number before I turned the phone over. My daughter's voice was tight, higher than usual. "Mom, something's wrong with the business accounts. Vance can't get into the portal at all, and the contact at Hartley Group says there's a hold on the partnership documentation. Did something happen with the bank?" I lifted the rolls from the rack. "I made some changes," I said. A pause. "What kind of changes?" "I've been going through the accounts," I said, "and through the paperwork from March." The silence stretched longer. I could hear her breathing. I could hear her husband saying something in the background, his voice low, insistent. "Mom," she shifted her tone. Quieter now, almost gentle. "You don't understand what we were building toward. The Hartley Group has real money behind them. This could have been good for both of us. For the bakery." "Without asking me," I said. A beat of silence. "You would have said no," she said simply, without apology. "I know," I said. I hung up. I stood at the counter and finished glazing the rolls. The bakery smelled like brown sugar and cinnamon, and the faint char of a clean oven running hot. Outside, the first customer was already at the door. My husband had an old friend from his years on the county planning board, a woman named Genevieve, who had gone to law school in her 40s and set up her practice in a converted carriage house about 10 miles east of town. She handled contracts and estate work mostly, and she had a way of reading a document like she was reading a landscape, taking in the whole shape before settling on the details. My husband trusted her the way he trusted the sourdough starter, completely, and for good reason. I called her the morning after. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Unhurried, exact, the kind of voice that has read every line of every contract it has ever encountered and missed nothing. "Alma," she said when I had explained it, "how are you holding up?" "I'm baking," I said. She told me to come Thursday. Her office had Dutch doors and a potbelly stove she kept lit even in summer, and she was wearing mud boots when she answered. A coffee mug on her desk read, "I've seen the fine print." I set everything out on the long table: the partnership amendment, the account printouts, the photographs I had exported to paper from my daughter's tablet, the original bakery deed my husband and I had signed in 1987, the ledger with the new entries. Genevieve read without asking questions. When she finished, she took off her reading glasses and looked at me directly. "The amendment has problems," she said. "You signed without independent legal counsel. That's a significant defense." "How good?" "Good enough, but I'd rather make the whole thing moot." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "Let me tell you what I'd propose." We worked for almost 3 hours. By the time I signed the final documents, the partnership amendment had been formally disputed on the grounds of material misrepresentation. The Hartley Group received notice by certified mail, and Hadley's Bakehouse had been placed in a revocable living trust. In the event of my death, all proceeds and property would transfer to the Millhaven Culinary Apprenticeship Program, a county initiative that trained young people from low-income households for careers in food service and professional baking. My son-in-law's name was in none of it. Genevieve slid the folder across to me. "This holds," she said. "The bakery is yours as long as you're able to run it, and when you're not, it goes somewhere it can do what a bakery is supposed to do." On the way out, I stopped at the corkboard by her door. There was a photograph pinned to it, Genevieve and my husband at some county hearing. 20 years ago at least, both of them laughing, him in his work apron, her in a blazer with papers under her arm. They looked like two people who understood that the right kind of paperwork, handled carefully, was its own form of stubbornness. I drove home with the windows down. The fields along Route 9 were going gold at the edges, October working its way in early. My voicemail had 2 messages. The first was from my son-in-law's mother. Her voice was climbing before she finished her first sentence. She wanted me to understand that her son had worked very hard on this arrangement, that I was making a terrible mistake, that my daughter had told her I would be reasonable. She said reasonable the way people say it when they mean cooperative on their terms. She did not say my name. She never does. I saved the message and forwarded it to Genevieve with a note. "Received today, keeping for the record." The second was from my daughter. She had stopped sounding urgent. She sounded tired and flat. "I just want to understand why you won't trust us." I sat with that one for a long time before deleting it. They came back from Florence 8 days in instead of 10. My daughter came to the bakery alone. Her husband waited in the car across the street. I saw him through the front window, arms folded, watching the door without getting out. She came in at 10 minutes to closing. She stood at the counter with her hands wrapped around each other and looked for a moment at the photograph above the espresso machine. Her father with flour on his chin, me laughing, before she looked at me. "Dad built this place," she said. "We built it," I said. She was quiet. I took the spare apron from the hook beside the register, the clean white canvas one I always keep there as backup, and set it on the counter between us. "If you want to be part of this bakery," I said, "it starts here." She looked at the apron, then at me. "Is that some kind of punishment?" "It's an invitation," I said. "The same one your father gave me 38 years ago, the same one I'd give anyone." She did not pick it up. She pressed her lips together and looked away, the way she used to do as a girl when something had not gone her way and she didn't have the words yet. Then she turned and walked out. Through the window, I watched the car pull from the curb and move down Oak Street without stopping. I hung the apron back on its hook. I turned off the display case lights and swept the flour from the floor. My knees were talking to me the way they do at the end of a long day. Outside, a mockingbird was working through its full repertoire from the maple at the corner. I locked the front door and stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked at the sign. My husband's careful, imperfect lettering. The letters that had lasted because he made them slowly and with attention. Then I got in my car and drove home. The first apprenticeship students came on a Tuesday. There were 4 of them, 2 young women, 1 young man, and a quiet teenager named Raoul, who barely spoke but watched everything with the focused attention of someone memorizing a language they intend to speak for the rest of their life. They were placed through the county program, part of a 2-year certification track for students who wanted careers in food service. Genevieve had helped me contact the coordinator. They arrived at 5 in the morning, uncertain at the back door, and I handed each of them an apron and put them to work immediately because I have found that uncertainty dissolves faster in motion than in explanation. We made sourdough that first morning. I showed them how to feel the dough, not just touch it but really listen to it, the way it tells you when it's ready, the give and resistance that you learn with your hands before you ever learn it with your head. By the second hour, Raoul was asking questions, careful and specific. By the third hour, all 4 of them were covered in flour, and someone had said something that made the others laugh, and the bakery sounded the way it used to sound when my husband was still here, and we were still learning things together. At noon, the local paper sent a young reporter over, working on a feature about apprenticeship programs in small businesses. She asked to take a photograph of the students at the long work table by the front window, the one my husband had built from reclaimed pine the year we remodeled. The photo ran the following Thursday. The students were mid-motion, aprons flour-dusted, one of them laughing at something. I was at the end of the table, not posed, just present. The caption read, "Hadley's Bakehouse partners with Millhaven Culinary Apprenticeship Program to train next generation of local bakers." There was no mention of anything else. I clipped the article and taped it to the inside of the cupboard door, next to my husband's original scone recipe, the handwritten card from the early years, before it went into the journal, before the journal had tabs in it. My daughter posted a photo that same day, an airport lounge, a coffee cup, a clock emoji. No caption. I didn't respond. I was elbow deep in laminated dough and had no reason to stop. Mornings are different now. I wake before the alarm, the way I always have, and lie still for a moment listening to the house. Then I get up and make coffee and stand at the kitchen window while it brews. The maple in the yard is past its peak now, leaves coming down in the night wind, collecting along the fence line. October has settled in for good. I drive to the bakery in the dark. The streets are empty. The clock above the savings and loan reads 4:22 when I pull into the lot and unlock the back door, and hang my jacket on the hook and tie on my apron and feel the warmth from the proofing drawers reach me first, before even the lights come on. This is mine. Not in the way of a possession held tightly, but in the way a thing becomes yours when you have given it years and grief and attention and the early hours of every single morning for nearly 4 decades. The students come 3 mornings a week now. I've started teaching them the harder things. The croissant dough, the lamination, the parts of baking that are more about patience than technique. Raoul has begun to develop real instincts. Last week, he adjusted the hydration on the sourdough without being asked, just from watching the dough move. My husband would have noticed that. He would have said nothing, just nodded the small nod that meant he'd seen it. My daughter and I have not spoken in 6 weeks. Her husband sent a message through the bakery's contact form about the dispute resolution. My attorney handled the response. My daughter posted something last week, a black and white quote image about people who choose pride over family. I read it once and closed the app and went back to what I was doing, which was measuring butter into cold flour. There is a part of me that still loves her. That doesn't go anywhere. It lives underneath everything else, patient and unchanging, the way a starter goes on working quietly even in the back of the refrigerator when no one is paying attention to it. But love and leverage are not the same thing, and somewhere along the way she had begun to confuse them. That was not something I could fix for her. I walk the 4 blocks to the bakery most mornings now instead of driving. The air is cold enough for a coat. The sky is barely beginning to lighten by the time I reach Oak Street and can see our sign from the corner. Last week, the students left a handmade card on the work table. All 4 of them had signed it, and on the front, one of them had drawn a rolling pin and a small loaf of bread in colored pencil. Inside it said, "Thank you for teaching us that this is worth doing carefully." I've propped it against the coffee canister on the windowsill above the sink, where I can see it from the work table. Some mornings I am still carrying the particular sadness that comes from being known by someone your whole life and having them see you, finally, as a means to an end. That kind of sadness does not move quickly. I am not sure it moves entirely. It becomes instead something you learn to work around, the way you learn to work around a sore knee or a burner that runs a little hot, steadily, with attention, without pretending it isn't there. But I am here, 4:30 every morning. The oven's on, the starter fed, the flour measured, the door unlocked for whoever is ready to come in and learn something. My husband used to say that good bread takes as long as it takes, and you cannot argue it into rising faster. He was talking about bread. He was usually talking about everything. The bakery will outlast us both, he said once, if we treat it right. I intend to keep proving him correct.